Donald takes the snap, looks left under pressure, bullets one over the middle, and he's got Crowder at the 10, cuts it back, at the 5, goal line! Sam Darnold did it again! Jones, pressure takes it away! Bradley McDougal. And he is in for a catch, touchdown! That's over the middle, in the air, picked off! Brian Poole to the end zone, touchdown! There goes Darnold, and Bell! He's doing it all for the Jets!
And welcome back to another episode of the Cool Your Jets podcast. We're your hosts, Ben Blessington and Michael Nania. We figured we'd come at you with another podcast, just talking about some of the things that have been happening with the New York Jets over the last few days, with Brian Winters being released, with CJ Mosley opting out. And, you know, we had 3 mailbag episodes come out in the last few days that have done really well. So we thank everybody for listening to them. But they didn't really talk about Mosley or Brian Winters or, you know, just the Jets kind of kicking off training camp. So we figured we'd do that today. And then also we will have some Adam Gase film review episodes coming up later this week. We're recording them today with Robbie Sabo, co-owner of Jets X Factor. So be on the lookout for those. But we figured we'd come at you today with just a brand new, fresh episode of Cool Your Jets. So, Michael, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. And I'm happy to see all these tweets every day of the players practicing, actually being out there on the field and playing. So we're getting pretty close. No preseason to kind of ease into it, so it'll be a lot different. We're a lot further from seeing actual football than we usually would be at this point, but the players are out there and we're closing in, so it's exciting to actually have some real news to talk about and soon some real games to break down.
Yeah, I think football season, or I guess Jet season, always starts for me when they have the media day and we see all the photos of them in uniform. But I will say, LaMichael Pirine, who I was pretty high on. I thought I liked his prospects of being a Jets running back for a long time. Referred to the Jets color of green as goblin green.
Yeah, that was a little disappointing. But I have to say, these, and this is the same thing as last year, these uniforms at media day, and they're great on the field, but in these pictures, they're just fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, the uniforms, so much of it is just about the color, and it looked more like Kelly greenish. They look a lot lighter in the light. So these are the things that matter. But him referring to it as goblin green is, you know, kind of enough.
Yeah, we're going to need the veteran leadership to step in there.
Yeah. Le'Veon Bell knew it was Gotham green. Come on. So I guess let's just talk about CJ Mosley first. Then we'll talk about Brian Winters and some other things, and then we'll get out of here. But let's open up with CJ Mosley because that's probably the biggest piece of news. Obviously, people have read about it the last few days. But what we want to talk about is how is Greg Williams going to, you know, address losing CJ Mosley and Jamal Adams, his 2 best players, probably the 2 best players on the roster, just a few days before training camp. Michael, I mean, obviously nobody has the answers at this point, but how do you feel about the Jets' prospects of replacing CJ Mosley with the depth that they have at inside linebacker?
Well, it was really disappointing when the news came out, and obviously he has every right to make that decision. I'm not blaming him at all, but I was really looking forward to seeing him and Avery Williamson playing together. I think it had the potential to be a top 5 duo in the league, maybe even better than that. When you really look down the list, there aren't too many teams that have 2 off-ball linebackers as accomplished.
Maybe that's not a good thing.
I mean, yeah, but still, I was excited to see them play next to each other. But, you know, now they have to move on. And the good thing is that they do have a lot of depth at this position, not necessarily players who have been good starters before, but you have a lot of viable competitors, and you only need one of them to step up and prove to be worthy of that. So you have Blake Cashman, Patrick Owasso, Neville Hewitt, and James Burgess all there to compete for that starting spot next to Avery Williamson. And maybe it won't even be an every down starter next to Avery Williamson because you have such a versatile array of skill sets with those 4 players. Cashman and Owasso are more those guys are more skilled in coverage as rushers. Then Burgess and Hewitt are a little more downhill against the run game. So there could be a lot of rotation between those guys, but I'm really looking at Cashman and Owasso. I think that's where the upside is. Hewitt and Burgess, I think, are a little more established. You know what they give you. They can get downhill and finish, but they really struggle in coverage and they miss a lot of tackles. But Cashman he's going into his 2nd year. So even though he struggled a lot last year, he also showed some really interesting versatility. He rushed off the edge quite a bit. He blitzed more times per game than any other linebacker on the roster. And the fact that he was the number 3 on the depth chart, the first one to replace Mosley when he went down, as a rookie, 5th round pick, shows a lot of confidence from Greg Williams. So Greg's probably high on him, and hopefully that means that his potential is realistically good and that he can take a breakout. So I like Cashman's versatility. You also saw him covering outside man-to-man against tight ends sometimes. So he's a lot of versatility in the passing game. Same thing goes for Owasso. He was up and down in Baltimore, had a tough season last year where he was benched. But in 2018, he was fantastic both in coverage and as a blitzer, produced quite a bit in both of those phases. So I'm looking at those two guys. Hopefully one of them can step up. But it's really good that the Jets have this depth with this position. Avery should be a solid starter. He's okay in coverage, and that's good enough to complement his very good run defense, which is probably top 5 at the position. So you're going to get that. They need some coverage. And also he can help you as a blitzer. Williamson is good in that role. But in coverage is where you're going to need some help and to upgrade over last year. That's where Mosley's impact was going to be really important. So hopefully Cashman or Owasso can prove worthy of, just covering the hook zones, the middle of the field, man-to-man against tight ends. Sometimes you don't need that all the time. But just overall in the passing game, playing their role, not biting so hard on play action, all those are things that the replacements struggled with last year. Cashman as a rookie, Hewitt and James Burgess. So if you can get Owasso or Cashman in the passing game to just give you some good production,
Right,
some solid reliability, they should be able to survive. And the most important thing is that this is not a crucial position. It's important, and Mosley could have helped them a lot. I was really looking forward to seeing him play. But just like safety, it's not a crucial position. It's all about pass rush and coverage on the outside. That's where it all starts. So you don't need it to be good, but it can still kill you. So hopefully they can do well in coverage, get someone out of those 4 to just step up.
right. Yeah, and it does help that it's not happening in the middle of the season. And then when you look at it, considering that Mosley only played 3 healthy quarters, I mean, it still technically is an upgrade over last year's unit, considering everybody's coming back and then they're getting a healthy Avery Williamson. So I would still say it's not necessarily a weak spot for the Jets. It's just worse than it could have been. And especially after losing Jamal Adams, I thought that his loss was going to be offset a lot, specifically in the run defense or in the run game, by having Avery Williamson and CJ Mosley back. Losing CJ Mosley is definitely a blow. There are some positives, I guess you can look at if you are the eternal optimist. Let's talk about those in a second. But yeah, really quickly, just kind of hammering home everything you said. I think for Jets fans, Blake Cashman is the best hope to have a successful season, because if he has a successful season, you could probably move on from Avery and pair him with CJ Mosley in the future. As you said, it's just if he hits, he's a draft pick that hit, which would be really nice for the roster. It does help that Neville Hewitt was the Mike linebacker for 15 games, I believe, last year. I like the depth that they have, and Burgess did flash as well. And then, like you said, Owasso, I like his blitzing potential. Cashman, you're right. He has the profile to be a really good pass coverage inside linebacker. And in today's NFL, I would argue that's probably the most important trait in your inside linebacker, is how he can handle those zone coverages over the middle. And Cashman definitely has the physical profile to do it. Did it in college. Definitely struggled as a rookie, but if he can make a jump into his second year, it's not just quarterbacks that can make that jump. It's rookies in general. Just look at Foley Fatukasi or Nathan Shepard. If Cashman can make, a big jump from year 1 to year 2 and really solidify himself against Avery Williamson, this position is going to be fine. And I think it'll be fine regardless if it's Neville Hewitt or James Burgess or Patrick Owasso. But just the fact that Cashman's a young guy who can provide long-term potential, that's who I really would like to see step up. And, I think they're going to feel it in the run game. I think their run defense is going to go down I think they were the best run defense or top 3 run defense last year. This year, I think you're looking at more towards trying to be an upper average unit, trying to be between the 13th and 15th. In pass defense, it's really going to come down to that cornerback spot, which has a lot of question marks. But, a guy like Pierre Desir has high upside. LaShawn Austin has a lot of upside. Quincy Wilson. So, a lot of question marks, but not necessarily dire question marks where, like the 2014 Jets with Dimitri Patterson and whatnot. I do like the prospects that the Jets have on defense. But talking about potential, positives from this, I guess it would be that, Mosley does get another year to rehab that groin injury. I know some people would roll their eyes, but, those core muscle injuries are very serious. And the fact that he had to have surgery on it, and the fact that he wasn't even cutting until, like a few months ago, he's even mentioned that he's not fully healthy. If it was just a regular groin pull or whatever, he would have been back in a few weeks. But the fact that he missed the whole season, outside of the unhealthy New England game, that points to that how serious this injury was, especially the fact that he got surgery after the year. So it does give him another year to get healthy, to be fully healthy. It does save the Jets some cap space. I guess the negative would be that they push getting out of the contract, another year, whereas I don't think Joe Douglas wants to be paying an inside linebacker $17 or $19 million a year. So he was going to bite the bullet this year, pay him in 2021, and then he could get out of it. Now he's not going to be able to get out of it until 2022 when Mosley's 30. But, I think that the Jets will be a competing team in 2021 and 2022. So you're going to have, a healthy Mosley on the roster there. I also help, for anybody who's, fans of a tank or losing Adam Gase or whatever with Sam Darnold playing well. I know that's negative talk, but, there is a scenario now where the defense could be worse. Sam Darnold could still play well. The team could still be bad and Gase gets fired. I know that's not the things that a lot of Jets fans want to hear, but there is a certain segment of Jets fans who definitely want to get rid of Gase. So losing Mosley and Adams, before training camp, may help that a little bit. But, there are some positives when you look at it from that front. The main one being that, this isn't a year where the Jets are going to compete for a Super Bowl. So they're not going to burn a year of his contract. But next year and the year after that, those are years where I think the Jets will really start to turn the corner under Joe Douglas. So, he could be a big help there. But as we said, I don't think this is a need for the Jets. I don't think it's like receiver, edge rusher, or something like that where I'm like, oof, I really don't know about the position. There's everybody in that middle linebacker spot on the roster has started games for the Jets. So, I'm not really worried about the position. Michael, I guess we'll go to Brian Winters unless there's anything else you want to add on Mosley. His release was a bit of a surprise, I guess. I wasn't expecting him to start. I'm not a huge fan of Brian Winters, but he is, well-respected in the locker room, has fought through a lot of injuries, did have a good 2-year stretch there from 2015 to 2016. But, obviously Greg Van Roten fits Adam Gase's system a lot better. He has better grades all across the board. But Winters, he's solid depth. If Winters is your backup right guard and Van Roten or Lewis, whoever goes down, you can plug Winters in and be fine at the position. He's an upgrade over Tom Compton as the back right guard. So a bit of a surprise. Obviously, he carries the big cap charge, but if you were trying to free cap space, wouldn't you do it at the beginning of the offseason? From my understanding, a lot of it is basically the uncertainty of the cap next year. So they cut him now, save some more money. That rolls over to next year. Also, with the release of Quincy Enunwa, they're going to bite a lot of Enunwa's contract this year. So they freed up that money with Winters. So it seems like it was a cap move. But Michael, kind of what are your thoughts on Brian Winters' release and then heading over to division rival Buffalo?
Yeah, well, I thought it was surprising in the sense that, as you said, at this point, you could have just kept him around as solid depth. I don't think he's a good starter. I think I've made that pretty clear, some of the things that I've posted. But he still could have been good depth. Like you said, Tom Compton was your backup guard last year. Winters is clearly much better than him, so he could have been a solid backup. And at this point, you don't really need the cap space necessarily since most of the free agency pool has kind of moved on. So that's kind of why I thought that cutting him could mean they have a move in mind. Nothing has happened since they did make the cut, whether it's Jadeveon Clowney, Logan Ryan, Vinny Curry, one of those players that are still out there. So it could be that, but at the same time, I think it might just be more of a vote of confidence in Van Roten, and also at the same time, just kind of pushing some cap space over into next year with the unpredictability of how the cap is going to play out. So it could be related to maybe wanting to make a play, especially with all three of those guys I just mentioned are defensive players and all the talent that, considering all the talent they just lost with Mosley opting out and Adams being traded to kind of make up for that a little bit.
Yeah, so especially Clowney in the run game too.
Yeah, that's going to be huge as well because Mosley and Adams, that they're both elite run defenders, and it's going to be hard for them to maintain where they were last year with their dominant run defense. But they should still be very good. But to be top 2 again, like they were with the Bucs last year, is going to be tough. Although they didn't have Mosley anyway, but especially with Adams, and they're still going to have those all those linebackers playing who last year missed a lot of tackles against the run. So those guys are going to have to improve. But back to Winters and the cap space, they could be doing something. I don't think so, but I think it's more about opening cap space for next year. In terms of the offensive line, pencils in Lewis and Van Roten as the starters, but it also could be positive about Cameron Clark, because now he's arguably one of your top two backups at least, because you have Harrison and Andrews. One of them will be the center. They can both play guard, so both of those guys can back up at guard as well. But then after that, Cameron Clark is probably your top backup at guard. So it is a good vote of confidence, I think, for Clark as well as Van Roten in his transition to the guard position that we expect him to make.
Yeah, I think the one thing that this points to is I thought that Jonathan Harrison might get the axe because they signed Josh Andrews. I figured, okay, well, he can be the backup center, and then your backup guards are Brian Winters and Cameron Clark. What this points to is Joe Douglas decided, you know what, that $7.5 million is worth more to me than the difference of play I'm going to get between Jonathan Harrison and Brian Winters. So it seems like Harrison should remain on the team as the backup center with Josh Andrews. You know, he might be the third string center and whatever, but it seems like this has secured Harrison's spot on the roster, which, you know, as a backup, I guess isn't horrible, but, you know, Michael and
I guess you can do a lot worse as a backup, but
right.
I think we talked plenty as a starter. You cannot do any worse in terms of guys who did start. In terms of the depth chart, you're probably looking at, like you said, Andrews is probably that third center, but Harrison will probably be the main guy there. Then Andrews can also play guard, Clark next to him, and then you have probably Udoka backing up George Fant. I think we all anticipated a competition, but I feel like Fant probably is going to be penciled into that considering his contract. So probably Udoka's your swing tackle. And then after that, whether or not they keep a 10th guy is where
I think
it gets
they will.
interesting.
I think they're going to.
I think they'd either Jared Hilbers, the undrafted free agent, who they gave the biggest guarantee of any of the offensive undrafted free agents they signed. So you have him, and there's also Connor McDermott, who started for them at the end last year. So those are the two guys who could compete for that last tackle spot if they want to keep a 10th.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think they might keep McDermott, especially if you've heard Joe Douglas talk about him. I can't remember if it was one of his press conferences in the spring, but he said, don't forget about Connor McDermott. And it's just, you know, you don't really hear a GM say that about a backup 10th offensive lineman unless he likes him. So considering that Douglas likes him, unless that was just, you know, PR speak or whatever, if he has a solid training camp, I do think they'll keep 10, especially when you saw the
I think he's good friends with Sam too. I forget when it was. It was one of those, I think it was after the Raiders game where they said they saw him out somewhere and McDermott was one of the teammates with them. So you have that.
He's got the in. Well, when you saw how many injuries the offensive line faced last year, it's like I wouldn't be as opposed to keeping 10.
Although he went to UCLA, so I don't know why Sam is friends with him.
Maybe not. Yeah. Okay. Never mind. Go with Hilbers. He's UW, right? He's Washington?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's still Pac-12, I guess. Yeah, I mean, these are I guess is the fun part about training camp, and we'll get more of the prototypical training camp, you know, beat coverage when the press can watch the practices and live tweet how Darnold.
It's not an off season without knowing Darnold's completion percentage and 7-on-7.
Yes, exactly. That's what I was going to say. But the fun part about training camp to me is, the roster management. Are you going to keep 3 running backs or 4 running backs, 6 receivers or 7 receivers, 3 tight ends or 4, just deciding.
Yeah, I remember last year we were as off as we've ever been because Douglas came in and cut like 7 guys and brought in all of his own.
And I think he might do that again. I mean, I still think there's a back half of this roster that he wants to reinvigorate. I would keep an eye on the receiver spot. It seems like Braxton Berrios is in tremendous shape, and Vincent Smith finished the season relatively strong. If somebody wiggles free, I think Douglas could sign people there. I just keep an eye out. You know, I guess we should talk a little bit about this now that we bring it up. What are some of the positions where you think there could be some surprise cuts or surprise makes? I'll start just to give you some time to think. The running back position, I would not be surprised. They did just release Trenton Cannon. I would not be surprised if they keep 4 and keep Josh Adams, who was a Douglas guy, was Philadelphia's leading rusher in 2018, I believe. But he's really the only guy in that stable that brings speed, that brings 40-yard dash speed, that breakaway speed that running back group does not have between Frank Gore and LaMichael Pirine and Le'Veon Bell. Obviously a fine unit between those 3, but they don't have somebody they can bring in as that change of pace who can rip off a 35-yard run. Michael, what are your thoughts on the potential of Josh Adams making it? And then are there other positions that you're looking at where you think there could be some surprise cuts or some surprise makes?
Well, in terms of the running backs, I think you bring up a good point with Adams. Him being in Philadelphia, there is that connection with Douglas, but Kenneth Dixon is interesting as well, I think. He wasn't in Baltimore at the same time that Joe Douglas was, but we know that those connections kind of run like that throughout the NFL. Even if a coach or GM or whoever it is isn't necessarily with the team at a certain time, they maintain those connections with the people they did work with. So Kenneth Dixon is interesting, and he's been hurt a lot, but when he played, he averaged 5.6 yards per carry in 2018, and he's only 26 years old. So I think he's interesting. And like you said, 4 running backs could be an option with, Adams and Kenneth Dixon as your 4th and 5th running backs. That's probably one of the better 4th and 5th running back duos in the league. So you could have a good option there. And then at receiver, I like you said earlier about that. I think someone that's not on the team right now is going to make the team at wide receiver, because this bottom of the wide receiver depth chart is very, very thin. Beyond the 4th and 5th spot, I'd like Vincent Smith and Braxton Berrios' potential. Both of them were top 5 returners last year. Smith is kickoff returner, Berrios is punt returner. But beyond them, it's really, you got 2 undrafted free agents with Cager and Campbell, who are interesting, but they're undrafted free agents who dealt with a lot of injuries. Then beyond that, Malone, Jehu Chassan, and Jeff Smith, not a lot of production there. So Demaryius Thomas, I'm not sure if you actually said that in this one, but we talked about it a lot. I think he is an option to come back at some point.
They want to see their receivers in training camp and see how they perform. And if Gase doesn't like it, then I think.
Yeah, and that's a good point too, because having already, Gase has already spent a lot of time with Thomas in Denver also last year. That's really valuable with, this offseason not having a lot of camp time, and also you could just bring him in, feel comfortable about, bringing him in and knowing that he can give you, just understand the offense and fulfill his role. So I like the potential of Thomas eventually being brought back. But if not him, I think someone else is going to make this team that's not here right now, because looking at this bottom of the depth chart, there's just not a lot to be confident in. It's just entirely projection with no production to go off of. So I think someone else is going to make it on the receiver depth chart that isn't here yet.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I'm trying to think of other guys around the roster. The one that sticks out to me is defensive end edge rusher John Franklin Myers, who
I was actually going to bring him up a few minutes ago when you first brought this topic up.
Well, I got dibs, so
go ahead.
I think you're just copying.
Make your John Franklin Myers. Everyone.
Well, he was a priority claim by Douglas last offseason, and then he missed the entire year with an injury. He played in the Super Bowl for the Rams. Actually, I mean, you're going to be the one that might bring some analytics on John Franklin Myers. So, but just he's one that jumps out to me. Is I know Greg Williams loves having rotation at the defensive line spot. I think you're going to see it a lot at linebackers as well when we talk about the injuries to Mosley opting out, excuse me. But Franklin Myers is a guy that's just intriguing, just with his experience and some of the production he had in LA. The Jets are looking for some sort of edge presence. He is more of a 4-3 defensive end, and Greg typically likes that. And then when you're seeing, he did draft Jabari Zuniga, so I think Greg does want to play a little bit more 4-3 this year than he did last year. I'm intrigued by him. And I think when you look around this roster, he's one of those guys that people aren't really talking about, but I think he could steal a roster spot. I think, he should still make it alongside guys like Nathan Shepard and Kyle Phillips and Foley Fott, those guys. But, if it came down to it, if they were choosing between Shepard and John Franklin Myers for some reason, if they did get in one of the situations where they chose to keep 4 running backs or 7 receivers or something, then I think they would probably lean towards Nathan Shepard just because of the production that he had last year, and he was a 3rd-round pick. But I would just keep an eye on John Franklin Myers. If he has a solid training camp, he's definitely going to be on this team.
Yeah, and in 2018 as a rookie, he was 41st out of 109 qualified edges in pass rush productivity, which is pressure rate with more weight to sack. So he had a really good rookie season. He was just banged up last year and couldn't get on the field. He had a strip sack in the Super Bowl, as I think you said, but he's interesting, especially considering the lack of pass rushing juice on the edge. You can ignore other things, whether it's injuries, draft pedigree, run defense, because they need that one important skill so much that it's going to help guys like Franklin Myers and Bryce Huff as an undrafted free agent make this team, because of how dire their need is for pass rushing juice off the edge, especially with all the talent that you've lost already. And looking at this one article I did, ranking every player on the roster, and 2 of the guys in the header image out of 5 are not on the team already, Adams and Mosley. So kind of shows you how these last couple of weeks have gone. But I'm rooting for Franklin Myers. Yeah, hopefully him and Bryce Huff have the most upside as pass rushers, I think, of the edge rushers on this roster. And Zuniga as well will be interesting, but in terms of this year, obviously you give him the rookie year pass in terms of development. So, I mean, Bryce Huff is an undrafted rookie too, but so I guess Huff, Franklin Myers, and Zuniga are where your pass rushing upside is.
Yeah, and that's pretty thin to put it lightly. Again, I mean, guys like Zuniga and Huff and even John Franklin Myers might have a lot of upside, but as far as production, John Franklin Myers clearly brings that.
Yeah, I mean, they have upside based on the fact that they're young, but the bottom line is they're probably not going to do anything.
Right. I mean, as fans, we can look at them and be optimistic. I am optimistic about Zuniga, but as you said, he is a rookie, and Huff, who we had on the podcast to do some film breakdown, was very impressed by him. I think he'll make it, but again, he's a rookie. Franklin Myers, though, you're right.
Lorenzo Malden had upside. Frankie Lulu had upside. Atauchu had upside. So
Devin Smith had upside. Chad Hansen had a nickname for a year. But yeah, I just think that with Franklin Myers, like you just put it, 41st at 109th. That's obviously not great. That's probably Jordan Jenkins territory, maybe better, but that's at least just deserving of playing time. So I think the Jets will hold on to any sort of pass rushing production that they can get. So I think he'll make it. All right, so that'll do it for this episode of the Cool Your Jets podcast. As I mentioned at the top of the podcast, Michael and I have a lot more coming from the CYJ feed. Our goal is pretty much to have 3 to 4 podcast episodes every week. We're going to be recording later today with Robbie Sabo about Adam Gase's offense, breaking down some of the tendencies. We're going to be going through a few drives with Robbie, just talking about the things that we want to see Adam do more of in 2021 and some of the things that we don't want to see him do. So be on the lookout for that. That'll be coming in the next few days. Michael and I also are recording an episode on the statistical expectations for Sam Darnold article that Michael wrote at Jets X Factor that you can find. So that'll be coming out in the next few days. So yeah, as I said, just 3 to 4 podcast episodes every week is kind of what our goal is, just trying to give you guys as much content as possible. You can follow us at CYJ Pod on Twitter. You can follow Michael at Michael_Nania. You can follow myself at Ben W. Blessington. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts or iTunes or Spotify. We are now uploading on Jets X Factor's YouTube. So you can find us there. We're getting a lot of love there, so we appreciate that. And you can find us on Jets X Factor's website as well. Best place to go for Jets content. If you're a diehard Jets fan, just go check it out. I guarantee you'll love the content there. I really think they're building the best Jets website easily. I think that's all the plugs I have. So just Michael and I are really excited to get this football season kicked off. I really hope they can make it through an entire season. These last few months have been pretty stressful and awful. So I know we could all use an NFL season to take our minds off of things. And of course, we need our Jets football every week to get our weekly dose of misery. So yeah, that'll do it for us. Everybody just stay healthy, stay happy, and go Jets.
Arnold takes the snap, looks left under pressure. Bullets one over the middle, and he's got Crowder at the 10, cuts it back at the 5, goal line. Sam Darnold did it again. Jones, this will take away. Bradley McDougal. And he is in for a Jets touchdown. That's over the middle in the air, picked off. Brian Poole to the end zone, touchdown. There goes Darnold, and Bell. He's doing it all for the Jets.